Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Humans Can Glow, written by the smog monster ZX. Harvick was a simple creature, and drawn lean from a nearby Drunel colony. He was traveling as part of a research for his final educational step, a study in xenobiology. He was assigned humans for his research. Harvick wasn't all that happy. Humans were dull as far as he was concerned. The species barely showed up in his own vision, as the Druneans saw the world through electromagnetic and thermal imagery. Sure, they were hot and they had brains and bodies were visible, but they seemed to lack a spark the others in the galaxy had. It was going to make this research difficult. They were tall, where his people were on the shorter side of average of the galactic height range. Where Harvick and his people had a main set of graspers and a secondary set meant to hold on to smaller objects or younger members of the family, the humans only had two, and they were impossibly strong compared to the Drunean physiology. Harvick recalled that he had once been on a transport that was hit by human raiders. Their brains were so focused on violence and anger that he was glad that other humans came and ran them off. The soldiers, though, had brains just as dark, and their armor covered their body heat, making them almost completely invisible to Harvick. At the power and strength of the species, and Harvick wasn't sure if he was going to be safe on his journey. "You must be Harvick," someone with a cheery, high-pitched voice said at the odd drawl to it called out. Harvick turned around to see two humans standing and waving at him. He recalled humans were fond of physical greetings and meekly waved his main graspers back, with the four cartilaginous digits. "Greetings," the second larger human seemed to roar, but Harvick realized it was the man's laugh. "Eileen and I were wondering when you'd get you. I'm Herman. Pleasure to meet you."
How did you identify me?"
Harvick asked before he remembered that humans could perceive light.
"Nice green fur, black stripes. You match Quaglar's description,"
Eileen said with a nod of her head, or what seemed to be her head. Quaggle was Harvick's academic advisor. Harvick was sure that Synonym was laughing while hanging from his nesting tree.
"I see,"
Harvick nodded.
"My professor said he arranged for me to help on your ship while I study. What will I be doing?"
"You can help where it's needed," Herman smiled. "Just glad to help a student learn." Then the strangest thing happened. Herman glowed. His brain seemed brighter than the Vakali on the stream high. His neural activity went crazy. Then a moment later, Eileen's neural activity lit up as much the same way.
"Really? Thank you."
Harvick bowed his voltaic sensor organs as he tried not to look directly at the now very bright humans.
"Please lead on."
Eileen clapped her hands and looped an appendage through Herman's similar appendage. Harvick followed the two mammals and eventually was brought to a decently sized cargo hauler of human design. It was blocky, oddly cramped on the inside, incapable of atmospheric flight, and precisely what Harvick had expected. He was given a simple bunk with a small booster to help him climb onto the mattress or anywhere else in the room. Eileen showed him around the room and noted how to use human toilet facility on a human ship. Harvick took note that her brain stayed on a continuous low glow the entire time. Then she left him, advising mealtime was 3.5 standard hours away. Harvick was left to puzzle over the glowing humans. He pulled out as many learning manuals as he could. He scoured their chapters and listened to the digital readouts carefully. He was shocked to learn that he had not been learning at all. His manuals all listed humans as being the most expressive and quite frankly dangerous to observe species. If only because their neural activity could, as one professor put it, explain the stars to a Drunean. Harvick sighed in defeat. He'd been wrong, and now he was going to have to rework the entire angle of his report. He would also need a new hypothesis, and he wasn't sure what that would be. When mealtime was called, Harvick was unsurprised that there was an animal on board. The creature was a canine bred for space travel, and Herman had introduced the creature as Daisy. At first Harvick was unsure of it, but after Daisy decided that he was in fact a friend, well, he quickly warmed up to the fact that the creature about his size was going to be curling up next to him for a while. The meal itself was a simple set of stews and soups, a typical Drunean-style dinner with proper meals. Harvick almost felt homesick.
Then Daisy's brain grew as bright as the humans. Harvick groaned in defeat. "What's wrong? I didn't mess up the Hugh stew, did I?" Aline asked. No. I've just realized how wrong about humans I've been. I've only encountered your raiders and soldiers, and their brains and thermal signatures are very dull." Harvick sighed in frustration yet again. "But you two, and Daisy, you're so bright. I clearly need to rethink my research." Eileen nodded. At least Harvick was certain it was a nod. He knew humans had their brain in their skulls, like most life forms. She then scooted over towards Harvick, using a curved shape of their seating area. "Harvick, do you need a hug?" Eileen asked. Harvick paused. In his culture, embracing was rarely done in front of others and was considered very private. And this was a human whose strength, even as a children, was something these people were afraid of. Was this human insane? So he paused and looked the human over. Her body pulsed with the warmth of kindness he had only felt amongst his own people, and her neural patterns lit up in an unfamiliar pattern of empathy. Harvick had been so very wrong. Humans glowed. Humans were terrifyingly bright. He would only conclude that this species' brains processed information much faster than his own or most other species. He was scared for a brief moment, before he nodded. Eileen pulled him in close, and he felt a warmth on a deeper level. He made a small chirp, and she let him go. She patted him on the head and gave a small laugh. "Don't worry about your theories and such. You got a long time to work on them out, right?" Herman asked. A light kindness flitted across these neural pathways. "Well, mostly. My people have a lifespan of about 4 times your own, I am told, though I don't know the exact math for it all. But it makes getting to know other species a little more difficult," Harvick said with a combined whistle and sigh. "And I must admit my own fears were—" he shook his head. "I'm sorry." Eileen nodded again. "You just do your study, ask us questions. We ain't averse to sharing." Harvick looked up at the human and nodded. "I was afraid I was going to be squished." Herman chuckled. "Eileen's a puppy dog, as much as Daisy is. Unless, and of course, you got something ill intent. Then she's a crack shot." "Oh my," Harvick squeaked. "My people trend away from violence." "Well, that's good. But you ought to defend yourself." Eileen leaned back a bit. "Just tell me you do that, at least. We don't want to lose any friends or nothing." Harvick nodded. "We use tasers and syringe darts." Herman whistled. "Gotta be a good stuff for the little guys like you." "Herman." Eileen's tone shifted. "Sorry, didn't mean anything by that." Herman's physical temperature rose around his head. It made his head glow even more. It changed it, somehow. "Why did your temperature rise in your head?" Harvick asked, suddenly losing his fear. "I've not seen a change like that." Herman paused, then nodded. "Right. You all see thermal and stuff. That's just me blushing a bit, kind of made a fool of myself." Harvick focused on his sensory organs on the human. "Fascinating. I would like to learn more." "About blushing?" Eileen laughed. "Heck, I can teach you that in an hour or so." Harvick scrambled out of the seating area, ran to his room, and returned with a recording device. He spent hours talking with his hosts and playing with Daisy. He was astonished at the human's ability to glow so brightly and so consistently. He had to learn why and how they managed this. He stayed on the ship for months, entertaining, inquiring, and speaking with other humans. He found so many glowed just as intensely as his hosts. It was on a trip to a satellite local, that Clemlin cluster's 4th planet, that Harvick saw them first go dark with minimal neural signatures he could detect. Their ship had shut down, and they were working fast to restart their systems. The raider vessel appeared, Scoothites, spine barbarians who ate everything they could and took what they wanted. Harvick was panicking in his room with his syringe. It had a heavy dose of neurosabotage darts loaded. It was powerful neuro-scrambling toxin. Eileen opened the door to his room and looked down at him. "Got a spot for you if you want to help." The darkness in her neural pattern had faded, and, while she wasn't shining, she was present in a newer, terrifying way. Harvick saluted and followed the human. She put him in one of the cabinets. The food was on the ground, and he had a large range of movement and cover behind the door. He suddenly realized what Eileen was planning. He smiled with a confident nod. Few things could stand after a single dosage of the darts had, but he made sure his weapon was loaded as Eileen and Herman rolled the crate out to make a blockade. Then they slid the door open. The first Scootite roared and rushed in. A blast promptly ripped through his torso of the alien in half. Harvick realized that Herman was using a slug-throwing weapon on their ship. The next one that rushed in had its head turned into a fine mist of warm blood just as fast. He realized that Eileen was also using a slug thrower. He was startled enough that Daisy rushing in and dragging down a Scootite by its throat didn't even faze him. Then multiple came in, and Harvick pushed the door open and fired his syringe 3 times before scuttling forward to reload. Red-hot lancers filled the cabinet where he had previously been not a few seconds later. He heard a shout and peeked to see Eileen holding her shoulder. The wound was heated by the plasma bolt. Harvick scanned the area, and most of the Scoothites were down. It had been a small ship, after all, but he saw one playing at being downed. He fired it out quickly, and the alien roared as it hit sensitive area. Its head also disappeared in another fine mist of blood and gore.
"Think that's most of them," Herman said. "Eileen, you need me to look at that."
The sound of the ship disconnecting was heard. "I think we need to get power back fast," Eileen grunted. "Har, can you run down to the engine and flip the startup?" Harvick leapt up from the cabinets and landed on the soft padding of a dead Scootite stomach. "Daisy, I need speed," he yelped as the dog ran over and crouched, letting Drunlin ride on her back. Soon he was in the engine room and leaping up to push a few levers he knew needed to be toggled. Each flip brought a burst of electrical power that nearly left his electrosensory organs paralyzed. On the final switch, it was too much for his senses, and he passed out. Harvick woke up a few days later on the space station. He was attached to a series of medical scanners that he could hear and see the thermal reflections of, but he could not sense the electrical pulses of the people or machines around him. "You awake, Har?" Eileen asked. He turned to her. He couldn't see the brightness of her mind, but he knew his sensory organs were not being blocked. He nodded. He knew what happened. He had destroyed his organs with overstimulation. He sat up and tried to focus on her. "I'm so sorry, Harvick," she snuffled. "I forgot you see electrical pulses." Harvick cleared his throat. "Did it keep us alive?" She nodded. "I got a couple of new stitches. Daisy does too." Harvick nodded and let himself rest again. "Then it was a fair trade, my friends." He felt Herman's hand on his shoulder.
"You need anything, you let us know."
Harvick paused for a moment. Then he smiled. "I think I might have an idea." 30 Earth years later, an old Drunlin professor stood at his pulpit, his gaze running over the many students in front of him who were watching with rapt attention. He was giving a lecture on how every species experiences existence differently. He had covered his peoples first, then the Scootanites and the Qualo. Finally, we got to the humans. A hand raised. "Forgive me, Professor, but the implants in your skull, what do they do?" As was a Drunlin student.
"They allow me to process light as visual data,"
the old professor explained.
"I got them during a study of humans.
We saved each other, but it cost me my electrosensory. So I came up with an interesting idea." "But now you can't see their brightness," another Drunlin student said. The old professor laughed.
"Oh, trust me. I know the ways humans can glow. I've seen it in 3 spectrums, and even though I can't see by our primary method, I am at no disadvantage."
"Professor Harvick, is it true that humans have combat drugs in their biology?" a Qualio student asked, "because my sister says that's a lie." Old Professor Harnick laughed, a bellowing sound that came out more like a bark as he circled back to his desk and looked at a picture frame on his desk. He nodded at the image of his last picture with Eileen and Herman. They were still out there shipping food and goods with several new dogs on their ship, their own children having gotten ships or businesses of their own. Their smiles gave him the memory of the brilliance of their neural patterns. He sighed as he sat down.
"Oh, that is very much true," Harvick nodded. "But this lesson is about their symbiotic evolution with canines."
The glass shuddered with fear. Many other species had only ever met canines while they were defending their families or homes. Hopefully, he could get through to his class as an old advisor had gotten through to him. Hopefully, he could teach them to understand why humans glow.
Alpha 050 Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.